Almost Twins by Mark Fielding Darden. Chapter 12. The Family Moves On. 1969 to 2000. As the world began to catch up with the Spaulding family, it became clear to everyone that Geoff would leave Panama to pursue college and a career in the United States. He was always good with gadgets and electronics, and computers had just come onto the scene. He and Eliza had become more than childhood sweethearts. They were now 19 and engaged, and Georgie was still watching. While on a trip in 1969 to visit his uncle in the Canal Zone, Geoff met a man at the Balboa Yacht Club in the Bay of Panama. "Geoff," his uncle began, "I'd like you to meet the next billionaire on the planet. He's the senior vice president of IBM. Geoff, in his usual modest way, said, "Pleased to meet you, sir. I'm Geoff Spaulding." To which the man replied, "What do you know about computers?" 30-some years later, Geoff and Eliza were living in California in a 9,700-square-foot mansion in the hills above Silicon Valley. By then, Geoff was well into a 30-year career with IBM. Y2K had just come and gone, and the world did not end. Geoff and Eliza had 2 4-wheel-drive Mercedes, a sailboat on the coast, another home in the Perlas Islands of Panama, and a private jet to get there. And they still had the family estate near Punta Mala. Georgie was living in Rio Piedra, and Enrico and Angelica were still taking care of him. Georgie had just turned 50. Todd and Loretta were retired and had moved to California as well. There was enough money between father and son to let Georgie live wherever he wanted, so long as it didn't interfere with their plans. They would never abandon him, but they had futures to live that did not include managing a brain-damaged grown man the rest of their lives. They could pay someone else to do that. To Todd and Loretta's credit, they kept Georgie with them as long as they were able, and then they paid good people to take care of him after that. They visited Georgie at his home, the old Spaulding estate, several times a year in Rio Piedra, but they were getting old. The plan was working fine until one morning when a woman from the town came to the clinic and claimed Georgie had assaulted her the previous night. She would never actually say what happened, but everyone knew Georgie was a good man and would not have crossed that line. Nevertheless, the clinic called Todd Spaulding, who in turn called Geoff Spaulding. The two of them worked out a plan for Georgie. The year was 2000. Georgie would later claim that he was just sitting on a bench late one afternoon in the town square when a new woman in town sat down next to him. When he tried to hug her, she got mad and left. The next day she would go to the magistrate's office and accuse Georgie of assault. No one believed the accusation, but now it was a matter of record, and something had to be done. The woman was ashamed that she had mistaken a brain-damaged man for a handsome, normal man, and had retaliated with a lie. But how could she have known? Except for his bad leg, Georgie was still a good-looking man. Unfortunately, Georgie would have to suffer the consequences of the woman's lie, and off to the California Coastal Clinic he went, for 10+ years. Chapter 13. Get Back to Where You Once Belonged. 2012. Georgie summoned Geoff, and he arrived that day at the California Coastal Clinic while Georgie was leaving the cafeteria. At this point in his life, there was little else to look forward to for Georgie. Both men were now 62 years old. Geoff was strong and healthy, but due to his stroke shortly after arriving at the facility, Georgie was not. Georgie was polite to his family and didn't complain about his home, but he desperately wanted to return to Rio Piedra. Geoff had already called in advance so that the floor manager at the California Coastal Clinic was ready with the paperwork. Quickly, they went through Georgie's belongings and packed all the clean and necessary items for the move. It only took one old suitcase, and they were done. About 11 years previously, Georgie had had a mild stroke just after he arrived at the clinic. Then Todd and Loretta died days apart in a hospital nearby. Then 6 weeks ago, Georgie was diagnosed with prostate cancer. It was an early death sentence, though it might take years to be served. Georgie had not thought much about his own death during his life, but for the past 6 months, and especially the past 6 weeks, that's all he could think about. Death, it seemed, was in the air. Geoff must have sensed it too, because he appeared right about that time. When the twins met in the hall after breakfast, Georgie was not surprised. He hugged his brother and said, "When do we leave?" He already knew where they were going. Great minds think alike, especially when you're almost twins. Geoff said, "I have a plane ready for us. We'll be landing at the old Punta Mala airstrip in about 5 hours. I have 2 horses ready and some beer at the old home. We're leaving now. Do you have to use the bathroom?" Beer sounded pretty good to Georgie, but going home sounded even better. Georgie replied, "No bathroom. I'm ready." The private jet left the San Jose airport at noon and landed later that day as scheduled. The old Punta Mala airstrip had been repaved and lined with new nightlights, but other than that, it was the same field as when Todd Spaulding landed there some 60 years ago with his bride, Loretta. No customs officials or paperwork would be needed. Chapter 14. Up next.